Since their mother's death, the Millionaire'S twins had lived in silence, until a simple maid did something that left everyone speechless. Daniel Miller had everything anyone could want. A beautiful house with tall windows and long white curtains that danced in the breeze. A yard so big the boys could run for hours and never reach the end. And enough money to give his kids anything they asked for. But even with all that, the house felt cold. Not cold like winter, but cold like something was missing. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made your chest feel heavy. You could hear your own thoughts too loudly in that kind of silence. 2 years had passed since Grace, his wife, died. A car accident. Fast. Sudden. A regular Tuesday that turned into the worst day of his life. Daniel remembered the moment the call came. He was in his office talking about a real estate deal, half listening, already thinking about dinner with the kids that night. He never made it to dinner. That night shattered everything. Since then, he'd tried everything to keep things normal for the twins, Noah and Nathan. They were only 5 when it happened. Daniel didn't know what to do with 2 little boys crying in their pajamas at midnight, asking where mommy was. The first year was the hardest. Noah barely spoke. Nathan started wetting the bed again. They both stopped laughing. Daniel took them to therapy, hired the best nannies money could buy, filled the playroom with every toy from every catalog. Nothing worked. Now the boys were 7. They didn't cry as much anymore, but they also didn't smile. Not really. They talked quietly, mostly to each other, like they were afraid to make too much noise. They went to school, came home, stayed in their room, played with their toys in silence. They didn't like leaving the house. Birthday parties, school trips, even Disneyland. They didn't care. Daniel once rented out an entire water park for the day, hoping it would help. They walked around holding hands, quiet as ever, then asked to go home. The staff in the house came and went. Daniel had hired 6 different housekeepers in the past year. None of them lasted long. Some couldn't handle the silence. Some tried too hard to cheer the boys up, and the boys just pulled away. One even brought them balloons and a clown once without asking. Nathan ran and locked himself in the bathroom. Daniel fired her the next day. The only person who had stayed since the beginning was Mrs. Green, the older woman who'd been Grace's assistant before she passed. She helped Daniel with the boys' school paperwork, managed the schedule, and handled things no one else remembered. She was kind, but tired. Daniel knew he couldn't lean on her forever. He missed Grace every single day. Not just her smile or her laugh, but the way she made their home feel alive. She used to bake cookies on Sundays and forget the timer, so the bottoms always burned. She used to sing songs from old movies while doing the laundry. The boys would chase her around the kitchen giggling. That was gone now. All of it. Daniel had changed too. He stopped going to dinner parties, stopped traveling unless he had to. Work became a distraction. He spent hours locked in his home office, buried in numbers and contracts. At night he walked past the twins' room, pausing just long enough to hear their soft breathing. That was the only thing that comforted him, knowing they were still there, even if they were lost in their own sadness. He didn't know how to fix it. He was a problem solver by nature, but this wasn't something he could fix with money or logic. He had no idea how to bring joy back into his kids' lives. Every time he tried, it felt forced. Every smile he tried to pull from them disappeared the second he looked away. One afternoon he found Nathan sitting alone on the floor of the living room, holding one of Grace's scarves. It still smelled like her faintly, even after all this time. Nathan wasn't crying. He just sat there quiet, turning the fabric over in his hands. Daniel didn't say anything. He sat beside him, close but not touching. After a while, Nathan leaned against his arm. That moment stayed with him for weeks. Even the pets had changed. Their golden retriever, Buddy, once full of energy and clumsy joy, now spent most of his days lying in front of the door, waiting, like he thought Grace might come back any minute. Daniel didn't talk about his grief, not to his friends, not to his business partners. What could he say? That his heart felt like it was stuck in the past? That his home, despite its beauty, felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed? He had just started to consider moving. Maybe a new house, a fresh start. Maybe it would help the boys if they weren't surrounded by all the reminders. But every time he thought about packing up Grace's things, his chest tightened. He couldn't do it. Not yet. That night, as he lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized something had to change. Not later. Now. The boys deserved more than this quiet sadness. He didn't know what the answer was, but he had to try something different. The next morning, he asked Mrs. Green to start searching for a new housekeeper. Not just someone who could cook and clean, but someone who had heart, someone who could make the house feel alive again. He didn't say it out loud, but what he meant was someone who could reach the boys in a way he couldn't. Mrs. Green raised an eyebrow. "You're finally ready?" He nodded slowly. "It's time." And that was the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. The day the silence in that house started to change, and even if no one saw it coming. It was a Tuesday morning when Emily Carter walked up the long driveway of the Miller estate. The sky was cloudy, not raining, just sitting there like it couldn't decide what it wanted to do. She kept her head down as she walked, holding onto her bag tightly, her hands slightly sweaty even though the air was cool. Her shoes were a little worn out at the heels. Her jacket had a tiny tear near the seam. She'd stitched it herself the night before just in case someone noticed. She had no idea what to expect. When she applied for the job, all she knew was that the pay was good, the place was huge, and the man who owned it had 2 kids. No one said much else. She wasn't even sure she'd get an interview, but then she got the call. They needed someone right away. She needed a job. It lined up. When the front door opened, she was greeted by an older woman in a navy blue sweater, gray hair pulled back neatly. She didn't smile, but she wasn't cold either. "You must be Emily," the woman said, stepping aside. "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied quietly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Nice to meet you." The woman gave her a quick nod. "Come in. Mr. Miller will see you in his office." The house was massive. The floors were polished so well she was afraid to take a wrong step. Big windows. Clean, perfect furniture. It didn't feel like a home, though. It felt like a showroom. Quiet, too. Way too quiet for a house with 2 boys in it. She noticed that right away. The office door was open and she stepped inside when the woman pointed her in. Daniel Miller was sitting behind a big desk, dressed in a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a few buttons undone like he'd been working since dawn. He stood up when she entered, polite but distracted. "Emily Carter?" he asked, reaching out his hand. "Yes, sir." He looked her over quickly, not in a rude way, just taking her in. Her calm face, the way she didn't flinch, the nervous way she gripped her hands together. There was something honest about her, not polished, not trying too hard, just real. "Have a seat," he said, sitting down again. "I won't take much of your time." She nodded and sat, placing her bag carefully beside her feet. He looked at a folder in front of him. "You've worked in 3 houses before this, all with children?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "And in 2 of those I stayed over, full time." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "We're not looking for just someone to cook and clean. I understand. We've had people here before. It didn't work out. My boys are quiet. They've been through a lot." She gave a small nod. "I read about it. I'm sorry." He looked at her for a long second. "We don't need cheerful. We don't need fake energy. We just need someone kind." Emily's voice was steady. "That I can do." Daniel leaned back slightly. For some reason, he believed her. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was the calm in her voice. Maybe it was the way she didn't fill the silence with useless chatter. She just sat there waiting, letting him think. Most people tried to impress him. She didn't. "I can't promise they'll talk to you," he said. "I don't need them to," she replied. "Not at first." He nodded. "You can start tomorrow." And just like that, she was in. That evening, she walked through the house slowly, getting to know the layout. She didn't go into the boys' room. She didn't want to make it weird. She just looked around, took notes in her head. The kitchen was spotless, but cold. No signs of life. No magnets on the fridge. No drawings on the wall. She figured that was part of it. A home that had been holding its breath for too long. The next morning, she came in early, made herself a cup of tea, looked around again. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that made her chest feel heavy. She knew this kind of quiet. She'd lived with it once. Around 8, the twins came downstairs. Identical, small, sleepy-eyed boys in matching sweatshirts. They didn't look at her. They walked straight to the table and sat down. She gave them space. No big hellos. No fake cheer. Just placed breakfast in front of them gently. Noah poked at his eggs. Nathan ate slowly, eyes on his plate. Not a word between them. "Would you like some orange juice?" she asked softly. No response. Just little hands moving quietly. Emily didn't take it personally. She could feel it. Their world was small, like they'd built a wall around themselves and only let each other in. That was okay. She didn't want to break their wall. She just wanted to be someone who could sit on the other side without making it worse. Daniel came in just as she was wiping the counter. He looked at the boys, then at her. "They seem calm," he said. "They're doing their best," she replied. He nodded. No small talk. Just that. And left. The next few days were more of the same. Quiet mornings. Light meals. The boys didn't speak to her, but they watched her. Especially Noah. She noticed him peeking around corners when she sang to herself while folding laundry. One day, he followed her into the garden. Didn't say a word. Just sat nearby while she watered the plants. Emily didn't try to make him talk. She just kept working, humming under her breath, letting him be there without pressure. Nathan was slower to open up. He stayed by himself more, but she left little notes near his lunchbox. Simple ones like, "Hope you have a fun day," or, "I made your favorite sandwich today." No response, but the notes never came back in the trash. She didn't try to replace their mom. That wasn't her place. She didn't wear perfume that smelled too strong. She didn't touch their things without asking. She didn't ask them too many questions. She just showed up every day with soft steps, steady hands, and gentle eyes. At night, when the boys were asleep, she would sit in the kitchen and write in her notebook. Not a diary, just thoughts, things she noticed, what made them smile for a second, what foods they liked, what scared them. She was building a quiet map of who they were. Mrs. Green noticed. "You're good with them," she said one afternoon. Emily just smiled. "I'm learning." Daniel started coming home earlier. He didn't say why. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. But he'd stop by the kitchen before going to his office, nod at Emily, sometimes sit with the boys while they finished dinner. One night he stayed longer, just watched while she and the boys built a puzzle. He didn't join, just sat there, quiet, watching Noah giggle softly when a piece finally fit. Emily looked up for a second and caught his eyes. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. That was the first time she felt it, not something big, not love or anything like that. Just a shift, a crack in the quiet, and it was just the beginning. At first it was just the small stuff, the kind of stuff nobody else might even notice unless they were really paying attention. Like how Emily started putting a soft blue blanket on the couch in the living room. The twins used to sit there in the mornings before school, their knees pulled up to their chests like they were cold even when they weren't. She didn't say anything, didn't make a big deal out of it. She just folded the blanket and left it there every morning. By the third day, Noah pulled it over his lap without thinking. She put apples with cinnamon in the oven one rainy afternoon, not to eat, just to make the house smell warm. She remembered how that smell used to make her feel safe when she was little. That kind of warm, not from heat, from comfort. The twins came downstairs to see what it was. Didn't say a word, just stood near the kitchen. Nathan stood closest to the oven. Emily noticed but didn't say a thing. She just let them be. Daniel didn't say much those first few weeks either. He kept to himself. Still worked too many hours. Still came home looking like the day had drained every bit of energy from him. But he noticed. He saw that the dishes weren't just clean. They were arranged. The boys' towels were hung up in the same color order every day. There were fresh flowers on the dining table. Nothing fancy. Just little touches that made the house look lived in again. Not like a model home. Like someone actually cared. One night, around 8:30, the boys were already in bed, and Emily was still in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. Daniel walked in, loosening his tie, looking more exhausted than usual. "You don't have to stay this late," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't mind," she replied. "I like finishing things before I leave." He nodded, standing there for a second like he was about to say more, but then he just turned and walked out. Emily went back to wiping the counter. But the next night, he came in around the same time and brought 2 mugs of tea. One he handed to her without saying anything. She blinked, surprised, then smiled. He didn't stay long, just nodded again and walked away. Still no small talk. But the tea was warm and sweet, and she remembered that moment way longer than she expected to. A week later, she noticed that Nathan had a habit of lining up the pieces of toast on his plate in perfect rows. She didn't comment. She just made sure his toast always came out in clean, even slices. Noah liked his cut into little triangles. She did that too. She didn't ask them questions. She just noticed, remembered, and adjusted. The boys didn't talk much, but slowly things began to change. Noah started following her more around the house. If she was folding laundry, he'd stand at the door and watch. If she was sweeping the porch, he'd sit on the steps. One afternoon, he offered to help. She handed him a pair of socks to match, and for 10 full minutes, they worked together in silence. Nathan was slower. He still kept to himself, but he started sitting at the table a little longer after meals. One evening, he stayed behind after Noah left the room. Emily didn't speak. She just kept doing what she was doing, drying a few dishes. Nathan finally asked, so quietly it was almost a whisper, "Can you make pancakes tomorrow?" Emily didn't look surprised. She didn't rush to praise him for speaking. She just said, "Sure. Want chocolate chips in them?" He nodded once and walked off. The next morning, pancakes were waiting, with chocolate chips. Things kept shifting like that, little by little. One day, Noah laughed. Not a full belly laugh, just a soft giggle when Buddy, the golden retriever, sneezed so hard he fell sideways. Emily smiled so wide it hurt her cheeks. She didn't say anything, didn't make it a big deal, just kept petting Buddy while Noah giggled again. She started putting music on in the mornings while she made breakfast. Old pop songs. Nothing too loud. Just enough to make the kitchen feel less stiff. The boys didn't say anything at first, but they didn't complain either. Then one day, she caught Noah tapping his spoon in rhythm with the beat. She didn't point it out, just turned the volume up a tiny bit and kept cooking. Emily was changing things without pushing. She wasn't forcing happiness into the house. She was just gently waking it up. Daniel started staying home more. No one talked about it, but it was obvious. He began having dinner with the boys at the table instead of in his office. He asked how school was, even if they didn't answer. Emily noticed he looked tired in a different way now. Not overworked, just unsure. Like he wanted to connect, but didn't know how. She watched the way he looked at his kids like they were a puzzle he hadn't figured out yet. One afternoon, she found a crayon drawing on the floor near the twins' room. It was simple. 2 stick figures holding hands, one bigger than the other. Above them, in clumsy letters, it said me and Emily. Her throat tightened. She didn't say anything. She just folded the paper and tucked it in her bag, her hands shaking just a little. Later that week, during a rainstorm, the power flickered. The lights went out for a few minutes. Nathan panicked. Full body panic. Tears and shaking. Emily dropped what she was doing and held him without a second thought, rocking him slowly, whispering it was okay. Daniel came rushing down the hall but stopped when he saw her holding his son like that. Nathan clinging to her, trusting her. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just watched. The lights came back on a few minutes later, but something else had turned on too, in Daniel's face. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about her helping. It was about the way Nathan didn't look scared anymore when she was near. A few nights later, Daniel walked into the kitchen after putting the boys to bed. Emily was sitting at the table, tired but relaxed, flipping through a cookbook. "Did they go to sleep okay?" she asked. He nodded, better than usual. There was a pause. He leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're good with them," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "I just pay attention. Most people don't," he replied. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and closed the book. Daniel stayed a few minutes longer. They didn't talk much, but it was enough. Every day brought something small, a smile that wasn't forced, a question asked out loud, a drawing left on the fridge, and slowly, the house stopped feeling like it was holding its breath. It wasn't fixed, it wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt alive. It started with a sock. Emily had just come out of the laundry room, holding a small pile of clean clothes, when she spotted one of Nathan's socks lying right in the middle of the hallway. It was red, with a tiny tear near the ankle. She bent down to pick it up, not thinking anything of it, when she heard a noise. A small sound, quick and light, like a giggle caught in someone's throat. She froze and looked around. Noah peeked his head out from behind the door down the hall, half his face showing, his eyes wide and sparkling in a way she hadn't seen before. She raised an eyebrow, holding the sock like it was evidence. "Yours?" He grinned, then disappeared behind the door again. She didn't chase him. Not yet. She just stood there a second, then slowly walked forward, pretending to be on a secret mission. She whispered to herself loud enough for him to hear. "Strange. The hallway has been hit by the sock bandit again." No answer. Just a tiny thud from the other side of the door, like someone covering their mouth to keep from laughing. She slid the sock into the laundry basket and kept going. A few steps later, another sock. This one green. Another giggle behind the door. Emily crouched low, peeking under the crack. "I don't know who's behind this," she said in her best detective voice, "but I'm closing in." Suddenly, Nathan darted out from another room, threw a third sock at her feet, and ran. She blinked in surprise. The hallway exploded with movement. Noah came out of hiding, running past her barefoot, trying not to slip. Emily looked from one boy to the other, and something in her chest swelled. They were running. They were smiling. They were playing. She dropped the laundry basket right there on the floor and took off after them. "Get back here, sock bandits!" she yelled, laughing as her bare feet smacked against the hardwood floor. They screamed with joy. Not fear, not nerves, but joy. As they sprinted around the corner, little feet thumping against the floors, socks flying through the air like confetti. Daniel had just pulled into the driveway, earlier than usual. He'd had enough of meetings for one day and decided to skip the last one. He was tired and hoped to maybe eat dinner with the boys for once. He unlocked the front door and stepped in, and froze. There, right in front of him, flying past the entryway like a blur, went Nathan, his face red from laughing, eyes full of life. A second later, Noah followed, almost slipping as he turned the corner. Then came Emily, chasing after them with both hands raised like she was about to catch a wild animal. None of them noticed Daniel. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his keys still in his hand, his coat still on, and watched. Nathan dove behind the couch, out of breath and giggling so hard he could barely stay upright. Noah tripped and landed on a pile of pillows, shrieking with laughter. Emily flopped down beside them, panting, her hair a mess, her face red and glowing. She lay on her back on the floor and stared up at the ceiling. "That's it," she said, breathless. "I surrender. The sock bandits win." Nathan poked his head out from behind the couch. "Does that mean we get the treasure?" "What treasure?" she asked, pretending to be shocked. "The cookie jar," Noah said, crawling up beside her. "You said it was off limits." Emily rolled over slowly and looked at both of them with exaggerated seriousness. "Are you saying you've been plotting this all day just for cookies?" The boys nodded. Daniel took a step forward, still unnoticed. "I think that deserves at least 2 cookies each," he said quietly. They all jumped. Noah turned around. "Daddy!" Nathan crawled out from behind the couch, suddenly a little shy, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. Daniel walked closer, slowly, unsure what to say. He was still trying to process what he'd just seen. His boys, laughing, running, happy. Emily sat up quickly and smoothed her hair. "Sorry, we, got carried away." Daniel looked at her. His expression was hard to read, but his voice was soft. "Don't be sorry." Nathan walked over and gently tugged Daniel's sleeve. "We were sock bandits." "I saw," Daniel said, kneeling down to look at him. "You looked pretty fast." Nathan gave a small smile and leaned into his dad's chest. Daniel wrapped an arm around him and looked over at Noah, who was now sitting beside Emily, grinning with cookie plans clearly taking over his thoughts. The moment felt unreal. For so long the house had been quiet. Still, it had felt like grief lived in the walls. But now suddenly it was loud, messy, alive. Daniel stood and looked at Emily again. "Thank you." She shook her head quickly. "They did it, not me." He didn't argue. He just watched her, really looked at her, and saw something that he hadn't let himself notice before. Her face was tired, but in a peaceful way. Her shirt was covered in sock fuzz. Her hands were scraped a little from catching herself during the chase. But she looked happy. She looked like she belonged there. That night, while the boys sat at the table munching on cookies and milk, Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter and sipped his coffee. He didn't usually drink it at night, but he felt like he needed something warm, something to hold. He watched Emily move around the kitchen, helping the boys clean up, wiping their faces when they got milk mustaches. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was just being there. Noah pulled on her sleeve. "Emily? Yeah? Can we play again tomorrow?" She smiled. "Only if you don't throw socks at my face again." He giggled. "I can't promise that." Daniel laughed quietly into his cup. A real laugh. It felt strange. It had been a while. When the boys went to bed, Emily stayed behind to clean up. She moved quietly, humming under her breath. Daniel walked over and leaned against the counter beside her. "You're good with them," he said. She looked up, surprised again, just like the last time he said it. "I just try to listen. It's working." She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The hallway was quiet again, but it wasn't the heavy kind of quiet anymore. It was the kind that came after a good kind of chaos. It was a Friday, the kind of day where the sun came through the windows just right, and the house didn't feel so big anymore. Emily had let the boys help her bake muffins in the kitchen earlier that afternoon. There was flour on the counter, a few chocolate chips scattered on the floor, and one lonely muffin with a bite taken out of it that Buddy, the dog, had been eyeing for 20 minutes straight. She didn't make them clean up right away. The mess didn't bother her. What mattered more was how Nathan had smiled when he cracked the egg perfectly on the first try, or how Noah had high-fived her when he measured the flour without spilling it. After the muffins, they all ended up in the playroom. It wasn't planned. Nothing ever was. One moment they were finishing snack time, the next they were on the floor, surrounded by building blocks, toy trucks, and action figures missing arms. Emily sat cross-legged near the corner of the room, building a weird-looking tower with Noah while Nathan worked on something serious and focused, like he was building a secret base. The room felt warm, not just from the sunlight but from the energy. The quietness that used to wrap around the house like a heavy blanket was gone in that moment. It had been replaced by soft voices, random laughter, and the sound of plastic blocks being pushed together over and over again. Noah looked up from his tower and watched Emily for a few seconds. She didn't notice at first. She was busy trying to find a roof piece that matched his style. When she did notice him staring, she smiled without asking anything. That was one of the things the boys liked about her. She never rushed them to speak, never filled their silence with too many words. He blinked slowly, then leaned a little closer. "Emily? Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Of course." He paused, eyes on his hands, picking at a Lego piece like he wasn't sure if it was okay to say the next thing. "If I asked you to be my mom," he said softly, "would you say yes?" Emily froze, not in a dramatic way, not like a movie where the music swells and someone drops a glass. Just completely still, like her breath had paused. Nathan didn't look up. He just kept clicking bricks together, almost like he'd heard it before. Maybe they had talked about it when she wasn't around. Maybe it was something that had been sitting in Noah's little heart for a long time, waiting to come out. Emily didn't speak right away. Her eyes filled with tears before she even knew it was happening. Not loud tears, not the kind that spill down your face. Just that tight feeling in your chest when something hits you so deeply it doesn't know where to go. Noah didn't seem scared. He wasn't testing her. He wasn't trying to be cute or dramatic. He was just asking something real in the only way he knew how, with that wide, open look in his eyes and that quiet kind of hope that kids carry when they're not sure how the world works, but they believe it might be kind anyway. She reached out and touched his cheek gently, brushing back a strand of his hair. "I would be lucky to," she said, her voice almost cracking. He leaned into her hand, and then did something she wasn't ready for. He crawled into her lap and wrapped his arms around her like he'd been waiting for that hug his whole life. Emily closed her eyes and hugged him back, tighter than she meant to, her chin resting on his hair, her whole body shaking just a little. Nathan finally looked up, setting his blocks down. He watched them for a second, then stood and came over too. He didn't say anything. He just joined the hug. And for a long moment, all three of them sat there on the carpet, in the middle of scattered toys and crumpled muffin wrappers, holding on to something that felt bigger than any of them could name. None of them saw Daniel standing in the doorway. He had come home early. Again. Something had told him to. He wasn't sure what. He just felt like being there. The first thing he heard when he walked in was laughter from upstairs. It pulled him in like a magnet. He didn't call out. He just followed the sound. He reached the playroom and saw them, the three of them, huddled together on the floor, with Noah's head buried in Emily's shoulder and Nathan holding on to her like he never wanted to let go. He didn't make a sound, just stood there, hand still on the doorframe, eyes locked on the scene in front of him. Something inside him cracked open, not in a painful way, in a quiet, full way, like he was watching something he didn't even know he needed to see. His sons looked happy, safe, loved, and Emily, she wasn't just a housekeeper anymore. She hadn't been for a while, but this moment made it clear in a way that was impossible to ignore. He stepped back before they could notice him. He walked down the hall to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, hands covering his mouth. It hit him like a wave. It wasn't just that Emily had changed the house. She had brought something back he thought was gone forever. Love. Not just the kind between a man and a woman, but the kind that brings kids out of the dark. The kind that turns silence into laughter. The kind that fills a hallway, a kitchen, a playroom with something you can't buy, can't fake, can't replace. He stayed in his room until dinner time. When he came out, the house smelled like pasta and garlic bread. The boys were at the table, chattering about a story Emily had told them about a raccoon who stole someone's shoes. He didn't know if it was real, didn't care. He just stood there a second longer, watching. Emily looked up when she noticed him. Her eyes still held something soft, like the moment in the playroom hadn't fully passed yet. He smiled at her, a real smile, and walked over to sit with them. Later that night, after the boys had gone to bed and Emily was about to leave, Daniel met her at the door. "I saw," he said simply. She didn't pretend not to know what he meant. He looked down for a second, then back at her. That moment, it meant everything. Emily nodded, trying not to cry again. "It meant everything to me, too." He stepped aside to let her pass, but before she walked out, she turned to him and said softly, "They're special, Daniel." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "And so are you." She didn't say anything else, just gave a small smile and left quietly into the night. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. Not at all. After that day in the playroom, something in the house shifted for good. Not just in the boys, not just in the way the silence had broken. Something deeper, something between Daniel and Emily. It didn't happen in one big moment. It was slow, quiet, just like everything else in that house had started. Small, gentle, without warning. It was in the way Daniel started coming home earlier without announcing it. He didn't give a reason. He just showed up. Sometimes he brought ice cream, sometimes books for the boys, sometimes nothing at all. He just wanted to be there. He didn't sit behind his desk as much. He started showing up at the dinner table more often, even when he looked tired from the day. Emily never asked why, but she noticed. One night, she stayed later than usual. The boys had been full of energy all afternoon, jumping on the couch, turning the cushions into some sort of pirate ship. The living room looked like a storm had hit it. Daniel came home in the middle of the chaos, loosened his tie, and instead of telling them to stop, he joined in. He grabbed a pillow and tossed it straight at Nathan's chest, making the boy fall backward with a dramatic, "Ugh!" Emily had turned around in the kitchen when she heard it and just stood there, stunned, watching all three of them now rolling on the floor like they were 10 years younger. Daniel looked up at her, grinning like a kid, and said, "You're next." She ducked behind the kitchen wall before he could grab another pillow, and for the first time she laughed, that big kind of laugh, the one that surprises even you. Later that night, after the boys had finally gone to bed, after the water had been spilled and the cushions were all back in place, Daniel and Emily were both sitting in the kitchen. She was drinking tea. He had a glass of water in his hand. There wasn't much talking, just the kind of silence that feels comfortable, not heavy. "You're good with them," he said again. But this time it wasn't like the other times. This time, it came out softer, more personal. "I just care," she said simply. Daniel looked at her across the table. His eyes didn't move away quickly this time. "I see that," he said. She nodded, looked down at her mug. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. She wasn't imagining it. There was something different now. The next morning, she found fresh flowers in a jar on the kitchen island. Not roses, nothing over the top, just a little bunch of wildflowers. No note. No one said a word about them. But when Daniel walked past her that afternoon and caught her eye, he smiled. The kind of smile that says, "Yeah, that was me." Emily smiled back and went back to stirring the soup. Little things kept happening like that. Quiet things. Daniel started asking about her day, about her favorite music, her favorite movies, her childhood. He didn't do it all at once. He'd ask one random question during dinner, or while she was folding laundry, or when they were walking Buddy outside. But he was listening. She could tell. He learned she had a younger sister, that she used to love drawing, that she worked 3 jobs after high school and never really got to dream like other people did, that she was still figuring out what her future looked like one day at a time. She learned that Daniel couldn't cook to save his life, that he used to sleep with the TV on because silence made him think too much, that he had a scar on his hand from trying to build a treehouse in college with his brother, that he missed Grace, but didn't know how to talk about it, and Emily never pushed. She just listened. The twins noticed it too, the way their dad lingered in the kitchen now, the way he laughed more, the way Emily and Daniel didn't talk much when they were together, but still shared looks across the room that said everything without needing to say a thing. One night, the 4 of them sat outside on the back patio, wrapped in blankets looking up at the stars. Nathan sat on Daniel's lap, holding onto a flashlight even though they didn't need it. Noah curled up next to Emily, his head on her arm. They weren't talking, just staring up. "Do you think Mom sees the stars too?" Nathan asked softly. Daniel swallowed hard. Emily gently ran her fingers through Noah's hair. No one rushed to answer. "Maybe," Daniel said after a long pause. Maybe she sees us too. Nathan smiled a little, like that answer was enough. Later, when the boys were asleep and Emily was putting away the blankets, Daniel walked out with 2 mugs of tea again, just like the first time. She took hers with a quiet thank you, and they stood there side by side, sipping slowly. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, eyes on the yard. Emily turned her head. "You'd be okay." "No," he said without looking at her. "I wouldn't." She didn't say anything back. She couldn't. Her chest felt tight again, like too many feelings were trying to push through at once. There was no kiss, no big moment. Just that, him saying what he couldn't say before, and her hearing it. The next day, the boys built a cardboard rocket in the playroom. They made signs, colored it with markers. Emily found a sticker book and helped them decorate the outside. Daniel joined in too, cutting out stars and taping them to the walls. When they were done, Nathan stood at the top of the launch tower and shouted, "This house is the space station." Noah raised his arms and cheered. "Emily's in charge." Daniel looked over at her, laughing, and said, "Commander Emily." She rolled her eyes but smiled so hard it hurt. Everything felt different now. Not in a fast way, but in the kind of way that you feel in your chest. Warm, steady, safe. Something had been missing from that house. Now it wasn't. It was one of those mornings that started calm. The sun came through the windows just right, and the kitchen smelled like toast and strawberry jam. The boys were sitting at the table, both in their pajamas, trading bites of each other's muffins like it was some secret mission. Emily stood by the stove flipping pancakes while humming a soft tune. Buddy laid on the floor, half asleep, tail flicking now and then when crumbs hit the ground. Daniel walked in with messy hair and bare feet, still waking up. He rubbed his face, kissed each boy on the head, and walked straight to the coffee pot. Emily glanced over and smiled without saying anything. He smiled back, just a small one, and for a moment, it felt like this was what mornings were supposed to be. Normal, peaceful, good. Then the doorbell rang. No one moved at first. Just a soft buzz in the middle of breakfast. Daniel gave a half shrug and walked off to answer it, still holding his coffee. Emily didn't think much of it. Probably a delivery, or a neighbor, maybe someone from the office. She turned the pancakes. The boys kept eating. Everything stayed the same for about 10 more seconds, until she heard his voice, and then hers. Daniel. Veronica. That name froze Emily right where she stood. She couldn't hear every word, but she could hear enough. A woman's voice, smooth, confident, like she was walking into a room she already owned. She didn't sound surprised to see Daniel. She sounded like she expected him to be there, like she'd timed it perfectly. Emily set the spatula down slowly and wiped her hands on a dish towel. The boys kept chewing, completely unaware that something had shifted just outside the kitchen. Daniel's voice came again, lower this time. "What are you doing here?" Then the click of heels. A soft laugh. Emily stepped into the hallway and froze. There she was, Veronica Blake, Grace's younger sister, and everything about her screamed control. She wore a black coat, tight at the waist, her dark hair pulled back in a clean ponytail that didn't have a single strand out of place. Her makeup was perfect. Lips red, eyes sharp, and that look, the one that scanned a room like she was picking it apart one detail at a time. She turned her head and spotted Emily almost instantly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the help," she said like it was already a joke. Emily opened her mouth, unsure if she should speak. Daniel stepped in fast. "This is Emily Carter. She works here. She's helping with the boys." Veronica raised one eyebrow. "Oh, helping." Emily gave a polite nod but said nothing. The air felt strange now, heavier, like someone had dropped cold water on a warm rug. Daniel turned to Veronica again. "Why are you here?" Veronica stepped inside like she owned the place. "I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by. Check on my nephews. Been a while, hasn't it?" "You haven't called in over a year," Daniel said, not angry, just tired. "They've been through a lot." She didn't flinch. "Which is exactly why I should see them. I'm family." Daniel sighed but didn't argue. That was the thing about Veronica. She always walked that thin line where it wasn't worth the fight, and she knew it. Emily backed away quietly and returned to the kitchen, but she couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. She felt like something had entered the house. Not a person, but a presence. The kind that doesn't just walk around, the kind that watches and waits. 10 minutes later, Veronica walked into the kitchen without being invited. She looked around like she was inspecting the place. "Nice setup," she said. "Very homey." Emily nodded. keeping her hands busy with the plates. The boys were just finishing breakfast. Veronica stepped closer, her voice lower. I can see they're comfortable, but comfort doesn't always last. Emily looked at her, not scared, not defensive, just still. Veronica smiled. I know people like you. Quiet, simple. You slip in when no one's paying attention, and then before you know it, people start mistaking you for something more than what you are. Emily didn't reply. She didn't need to. Veronica tapped a perfectly manicured nail against the counter, then walked away. The rest of the day moved slow. The boys were happy to see their aunt, mostly because they remembered her from when their mom was still around. She brought them gifts, loud toys with flashing lights and extra batteries. Emily smiled politely even when the noise made her head hurt. Veronica asked questions in front of the kids that weren't really questions. So Emily stays overnight sometimes? She seems close to them, doesn't she? Do they ever talk about Grace with her? Daniel gave short answers, trying to keep the peace, but Emily could tell it was getting to him. She saw the way his jaw tightened when Veronica asked things that weren't her business, the way his hand tapped the side of his chair when she smiled at the boys but stared straight at Emily like she was a problem that needed solving. By the evening, when Veronica finally left, the air in the house felt heavier than it had all week. Daniel walked her to the door. She kissed the boys on the cheek and promised to visit again. Emily stayed in the kitchen, wiping down already clean counters. When he came back, Daniel leaned against the doorframe and let out a long breath. She's a handful, he said. Emily looked at him. She's protective. He nodded. That's one way to put it. There was a pause. She doesn't like me, Emily said quietly, almost like she didn't want to say it out loud. Daniel looked at her and didn't argue. She doesn't know you. Emily gave a tired smile. She doesn't want to. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle. She doesn't get to decide what this house feels like. Emily nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Something had been stirred up. Something that wouldn't go away just because the door had closed behind Veronica. Later that night, after the boys were asleep and the dishes were done, Emily sat in her room staring at the ceiling. She wasn't scared of Veronica, but she knew women like her, ones who used charm like a knife and always knew where to cut. She wasn't worried about herself. She could handle being disliked. What scared her more was what someone like Veronica could do if she decided to tear things apart, especially now, when everything had finally started to feel right. Veronica might have walked in with a smile, but she didn't leave without leaving something behind. And Emily knew deep down that this wasn't over. The twins' birthday was coming up, and for the first time in years, they were actually excited about it. Nathan had been talking about chocolate cake since Tuesday, and Noah kept changing his mind about what kind of party he wanted. First, it was space-themed, then dinosaurs, then both. Emily didn't argue. She just nodded and said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." Daniel had given her full control. "Whatever makes them happy," he told her one night while they both stood in the garage, digging out old folding chairs and decorations from years ago. The house started to feel alive with plans. There were balloons taped to walls, streamers across doorways, and music playing from the kitchen radio as Emily cut up fruit and arranged little cups of snacks. The boys helped too, sort of. They mostly made a mess with confetti and tape, but Emily didn't care. They were smiling. That was the whole point. On the morning of the party, the boys ran downstairs in their matching shirts with little rockets and T-Rexes printed on the front. Daniel took photos on his phone as they tore into their presents. Books, action figures, a new soccer ball, and matching scooters that made them scream with excitement loud enough to shake the chandelier. It felt like things were finally just good, real good. Then Veronica showed up. She wasn't invited, or maybe she was. Emily didn't know. It was one of those things Daniel probably didn't have the energy to argue about. Family was family, and Veronica was Grace's sister after all. She walked in wearing a beige dress and heels that didn't match the backyard grass. Her lipstick was too perfect for a kid's birthday party, and she had a gift bag in one hand and a cold smile on her face. "Happy birthday, boys," she called out, kneeling down like someone on a commercial. "I brought something super special for you." They ran over, not because they missed her, but because kids love presents. She handed them the gift bag and kissed the air near their cheeks, then stood and glanced around. Her eyes landed on Emily immediately. "You've been busy," she said, walking over. "Very festive." Emily nodded. The boys were excited. "I can tell," Veronica said, picking a piece of glitter off the table like it offended her. Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just went back to arranging napkins and cups while keeping an ear out for the boys' laughter. The party went on like nothing was wrong. Kids ran through the backyard chasing bubbles. Someone spilled juice. Daniel grilled burgers and handed out soda cans. It was loud and full of noise and exactly the kind of chaos the house had been missing. But Veronica didn't stop watching. At one point, while Emily was in the kitchen cutting the cake, Veronica came in behind her. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the counter with that look, the one that always felt like she was already planning her next move. "You really made yourself comfortable here, didn't you?" she said softly. Emily turned, holding the knife carefully, her tone calm. "I'm just doing what I was hired to do." Veronica smiled. "You mean caring for the boys like they're your own? Playing house with a man who lost his wife 2 years ago?" Emily didn't blink. "No, I mean making sure they're happy. They deserve that." Veronica stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You don't belong in this house. You're a housekeeper, Emily. Not their mother, not his partner, don't forget that." Emily stood still, but her hands were tight around the counter's edge. Veronica tilted her head. "Grace wouldn't have wanted someone like you raising her children." Emily's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. "Grace wanted them to be loved. That's what I'm doing." Veronica's smile tightened. "We'll see how long that lasts." Then she turned and walked out, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and a heavier feeling that settled over everything. Emily stood there alone for a moment, the hum of the fridge and laughter from outside clashing in her head. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not today. She wasn't going to let someone like Veronica ruin this for the boys. She finished cutting the cake, wiped her hands, and walked back out with a smile on her face that didn't match the storm inside her chest. The kids cheered as the cake came out. Daniel grabbed the camera again. Noah leaned across the table yelling, "Best party ever," while Nathan clapped like it was the finale of a magic show. And Emily smiled. For them. Later that night, after the last car had left and the house was quiet again, Daniel walked into the kitchen. Emily was cleaning up leftover plates, humming softly under her breath. "Hey," he said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You really made today special." She nodded, not turning around. They were happy. That's what matters. Daniel tilted his head, sensing something. "You okay?" Emily paused, then finally turned to face him. "She doesn't want me here." He didn't pretend not to know who she meant. He didn't ask what happened. Instead, he stepped closer. "She doesn't get to decide what we are." Emily looked at him, really looked. There was something steady in his voice. No hesitation. But still, that feeling was there, like a small crack had opened again. "She'll fight," Emily whispered. "Then let her," Daniel said. "We're not scared of her." Emily wanted to believe that. She really did. But deep down, something told her this wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. And it had already started. The thing about people like Veronica is they don't explode. They don't come in screaming or flipping tables. They slip in quiet, wearing perfume and fake smiles, and little by little, they take control of the room without anyone noticing until it's too late. After the birthday party, things didn't go back to normal. Not right away. Veronica didn't just disappear. She lingered, popped in more often, brought gifts for the boys on random days, texted Daniel with quick updates or family questions. She started stopping by the house during school hours, always unannounced, always with that fake voice like she was doing everyone a favor. Emily tried not to let it get to her. She kept her head down, stayed focused, kept her energy on the boys. But she felt it, the shift, the way Daniel seemed a little more tired after every one of Veronica's visits. The way she asked him about legal stuff now, like school guardianship, insurance, custody. She was digging for something. One morning, Veronica showed up with a folder in her hand. Emily was outside watering the plants with Nathan when she heard the front door open and that same clipped voice ask, "Is Daniel home?" Nathan's body tensed instantly. He didn't look up. He just kept pouring water over the same flower. Emily looked at him carefully. "You okay?" He shrugged. "I don't like her voice." Emily gave him a soft smile. "It's okay, let's go inside." They walked in through the side door, quiet, unnoticed. From the hallway, Emily could hear Veronica talking in the living room. Not yelling, just talking in that sharp, syrupy tone she always used when she was pretending to be polite. "I'm just saying, Daniel. What happens if something goes wrong? She's just the help. There's nothing protecting those boys from—" Emily didn't hear the rest. She grabbed Nathan's hand and quietly led him upstairs. That night, after dinner, Daniel walked into the kitchen where Emily was cleaning up. He looked off, like his head wasn't fully in the room. She brought papers, he said quietly. Wants to talk about custody rights, backup plans, legal stuff. Emily didn't turn around. She just kept wiping the counter. Because of me. Daniel stepped closer. Because she wants control. Emily nodded. Same thing. He exhaled and leaned against the counter next to her. She's not going to win. Emily didn't answer. She knew he meant it. But meaning something and stopping someone like Veronica weren't always the same thing. A few days later, Veronica showed up again. This time with lunch from a fancy restaurant, like she was just dropping in to be nice. Daniel wasn't home. Emily answered the door, her hands still damp from washing dishes. "Oh," Veronica said, smiling. "It's you." Emily forced a polite smile. "He's not home." Veronica didn't move. "That's fine. I wasn't here for him. I came to drop something off for the boys." She handed Emily a small box wrapped in silver paper with a black bow. Expensive. Too expensive for a just because gift. "They'll love it," Veronica said. "I'm sure," Emily replied, holding the box carefully. Veronica tilted her head. "It's sweet, really. How attached they are to you." Emily stayed quiet. "But you know how kids are," Veronica added, stepping a little closer. "They get confused. They latch on. Especially when they're missing something." Emily's grip on the box tightened just slightly. "You're not their mother," Veronica said softly. "I know that," Emily said, just as soft. Veronica's smile faded a little. "Then act like it." And with that, she turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Emily stood there for a long moment, the box still in her hands, her chest heavy. That wasn't just a visit, that was a warning. The next day, Daniel came home early. Emily was sitting outside with the boys, watching them play in the grass, trying to act like everything was normal, but she was quieter than usual. Daniel noticed. After the boys went inside, he sat down beside her. "She said something again, didn't she?" Emily nodded, staring at the sky. "I'm so tired of this," Daniel said. "She's not going to stop." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know what she wants. She's not doing this for them." "She wants to be in charge," Emily said. "She wants to remind everyone that she still has power." He looked at her. "She doesn't." Emily finally turned to face him. "She thinks she does." A few days later, Emily was walking past the office when she heard something that made her stop. Veronica's voice again, this time over the speakerphone. "She doesn't have a background in childcare. She's not certified in anything. No degree. Nothing on paper that says she's even fit to be around them." Daniel's voice was tight. "She's been here for months. She's never done anything but help." "That's not the point," Veronica said. "This isn't about feelings, Daniel. It's about what's legal, what's smart, what Grace would have wanted." Daniel ended the call. Hard. You could hear the beep through the closed door. Emily stepped away quickly before he saw her. That night, she didn't sleep. She kept thinking about the boys, about how far they'd come, how far she'd come, and how fast someone like Veronica could break it all apart with one phone call. The next morning, there was a knock on the door. Emily opened it and was greeted by a woman in a blazer, holding a clipboard. "Hi, I'm from Child Services. We received an anonymous concern about the care of the Miller children." Emily's whole body froze, and in that moment she knew. Veronica had crossed the line, and everything was about to change. The visit from Child Services lasted 22 minutes, but it felt like 22 years. The woman was polite, calm. She didn't act like anyone was in trouble, but that didn't make it easier. She asked to see where the boys slept, asked about routines, who handled meals, baths, school pickup, bedtime. Emily answered everything carefully, her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding the entire time. Daniel showed up halfway through. He walked in through the front door and froze when he saw the woman's clipboard on the table. Emily just looked at him. One look. That's all it took. His jaw clenched. She explained the visit in a few short words while the woman stepped outside to make a note on her phone. Daniel didn't ask who called. He already knew. That night the house was quiet again, but it wasn't the soft kind of quiet. It was tense, like everyone was waiting for something to happen, even if they didn't know what. The boys were fine. That was the part that mattered most. The woman from Child Services left without a problem. She didn't find anything wrong. She even said the boys looked well-loved. But that didn't change how it felt. Something had been broken. A layer of peace, maybe. A feeling of safety. Trust. Emily stayed late to clean up. She always did, but this time she moved slower, like her body was tired in a deeper way. She'd just finished wiping down the kitchen table when Daniel walked in from his office holding 2 mugs of coffee. She almost told him no. She didn't feel like sitting, or talking, or pretending anything was okay. But then she looked at his face. He wasn't offering coffee because he wanted to chat. He was offering because he needed to say something. So she nodded, and he slid a mug toward her. They sat down at the table. Neither of them spoke right away. She wrapped her hands around the mug and stared at the steam. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She looked up. "You didn't do anything wrong. I let her in." Emily didn't say anything. "I should have stopped her a long time ago," he went on. "But she's Grace's sister. She was around when the boys were born. She knew Grace since they were kids. I kept telling myself I had to let her stay in their lives. For them. But it's not about them anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." Emily nodded slowly. "She's trying to control you." He looked at her. "She's trying to erase you." That hit hard. They sat in that truth for a while. "She called child services," Emily said. "I know. She's going to keep going. I know that too." She took a sip of the coffee, even though it had already started to go cold. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, eyes fixed on his hands. "When Grace died, I thought my whole life was over. I didn't even try to fix things. I just went numb. I didn't know how to be a dad. Not alone. I still don't." Emily looked at him, but didn't interrupt. He took a deep breath. "When you came in, I didn't expect anything to change. You were just another name on a paper, another person passing through." She smiled softly. "Thanks." He laughed under his breath. "You know what I mean?" "I do." But then the boys started talking again, laughing, and I started feeling things again. Good things. Things I hadn't felt in years. His voice was starting to shake a little, like he wasn't used to talking this much about anything personal. "And then you," he said. "You started feeling like part of this family. Before I even realized it. Before I even let myself admit it." She stayed quiet. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. "But it did. And now, every time I walk into a room and you're not there, it feels wrong. Every time I hear the boys talk about you like you've always been here, it feels right. And I think I've been scared of saying it out loud because I thought maybe I was just lonely, or grateful, or both." Emily's hands tightened around the mug. She didn't breathe. "Not really. But I'm not," he whispered. "It's more than that." Her eyes met his. The air between them felt heavy now, full of things that had been sitting under the surface for weeks. "I'm falling for you, Emily." There. It was out. No music, no candles, no perfect moment. Just a man sitting at his kitchen table at 10:30 at night, with a tired heart and a full cup of coffee, saying the one thing he hadn't said until now. Emily swallowed hard. "I don't want to make your life harder," she said quietly. "I don't want the boys to get hurt. I don't want to be the reason someone tears this house apart." "You're not," he said. "You're the reason it's whole again." She blinked fast. Her eyes were hot. Her chest hurt. He reached across the table slowly and placed his hand over hers. It was warm, steady. "I don't want to pretend I don't feel it anymore," he said. "And I don't want you to feel like you're just passing through." Emily nodded, but she still couldn't speak. Finally, she said the only thing she could. "I feel it too." That was enough. They didn't kiss. They didn't say anything else. They just sat there, holding hands in a quiet kitchen surrounded by dishes and leftover birthday balloons, in a house that was still under threat, but finally starting to feel like home. The envelope showed up on a Thursday afternoon. It didn't come with the regular mail. It wasn't dropped off by the postman or a delivery service. It was hand-delivered. No stamp, no return address. Just her name written in black ink on the front in messy handwriting. Emily Carter. She found it tucked under the flower pot by the front door, right where the boys usually hid their drawings for her as surprises. But this wasn't a drawing. It didn't feel playful or sweet. The second she picked it up, her stomach tightened. She didn't open it right away. She waited until after dinner, after the boys were in bed, after Daniel had gone upstairs to take a late call. She sat at the kitchen table with her tea still untouched, staring at the envelope like it was something dangerous. She turned it over in her hand slowly, then finally slipped her finger under the flap and tore it open. It was a single sheet of paper, just one sentence. "I'm in town. We need to talk. Tyler." Her hand started shaking before she could even finish reading it. Tyler. That name hadn't been said out loud in years. Not since she left. Not since she swore she'd never go back to anything that had his name attached to it. She read the note again, then again. Her heart was beating so loud it felt like it was echoing off the walls. She folded the paper, slowly, then shoved it deep into her back pocket like maybe that would make it disappear, but it didn't. It just sat there, like a weight. The next morning, she tried to act normal. She made waffles with bananas and peanut butter, the boys' new favorite. They didn't notice anything was off. Why would they? She smiled when they talked, laughed when they told their silly knock-knock jokes. But she wasn't really there. Daniel noticed. She could feel his eyes on her all through breakfast. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her, carefully, like he was waiting for her to open up. Later, when the boys were outside with Buddy, playing some made-up game that involved sticks and yelling, he leaned against the doorway and asked, "You all right?" Emily nodded. "Too fast." "You sure?" She looked at him, eyes soft, but didn't answer. Not really. He stepped into the room and waited a beat before sitting across from her at the table. "You don't have to tell me," he said, "but if you need to, I'm here." She wanted to. She really did, but the words felt stuck. Instead, she just whispered, "Someone from my past showed up." Daniel didn't flinch, didn't push. "Is it someone who hurt you?" Emily looked down at her hands. "Not in the way you think." He nodded slowly. "Do you want to talk to them?" "I don't know." She stood up and moved toward the sink, like the conversation was too heavy to have while sitting still. She looked out the window where the boys were chasing Buddy around the yard. It should have been peaceful, but inside, she felt like the ground was starting to shift. That night, she found another note taped to her car door. "Tomorrow, 5 p.m., behind the diner on Oak Street." It didn't say more than that. Didn't need to. She didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. She didn't know what she was walking into, and the last thing she wanted was to drag him into it too soon. The next day, she told him she had to run an errand after her shift. He offered to keep the boys busy, said they'd probably talk him into pizza and a movie. She smiled, kissed Noah and Nathan on the head, and said she wouldn't be long. By 4:55, she was parked down the street from the diner. She didn't get out of the car right away. Her hands were sweating, even though the air outside was cool. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror, tried to prepare herself for what she might see. At 5:01, she stepped out and walked behind the building. He was already there, leaning against the brick wall, hands in his pockets, same old smirk on his face like no time had passed. Tyler. He looked older, a little thinner, less sure of himself even though he tried to hide it. He stood up straight when he saw her. "Hey, Em." She didn't answer. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You look good." She crossed her arms. "What do you want?" He hesitated. "I just wanted to see you." "No, you didn't. You don't come back after all these years just to say hi." He sighed and looked away. "You're right." There was a long silence. "I messed up," he said finally. "Back then, I was angry. I was drinking too much. I didn't know how to handle anything, and I took it out on you." Emily didn't move. She didn't soften. He looked at her again. "But I've changed." "Why are you here, Tyler?" He took something out of his jacket. A photo. Handed it to her. It was her, from years ago. Younger, standing with a little girl in front of a school building. Her sister. Emily's breath caught. "I've been trying to find her," he said. "I thought maybe you'd know where she is." She stared at the photo for a long time before speaking. "I haven't seen her in 6 years. She disappeared." "I know." He looked at her closely. "She was the only family you had." Emily nodded. "I thought maybe if you were in town, maybe she was too." "She's not," Emily said, folding the photo and handing it back. "And even if she was, you're the last person she'd want to find her." Tyler looked hurt, but he didn't argue. He took a step back. "I'm not trying to mess anything up for you. I heard you were working for some rich guy. I didn't come to cause problems." She raised her eyebrows. "How did you even find me?" He hesitated. "Veronica Blake." Emily's heart dropped. Tyler kept talking. "She reached out a while ago. Said she was trying to figure out who you really were. Asked if I had any dirt." Emily's face went cold. "And you gave her some?" "No," he said quickly. "I didn't say anything, but now that I'm here, I just wanted to see you. I swear that's it." She didn't believe him. Not really, but she couldn't tell if that mattered anymore. "Don't come near my life," she said. "Not the kids. Not Daniel. Not me." He nodded, then shoved his hands back into his pockets. "You got it." She turned and walked away. When she got back to her car, she sat in silence for a long time before starting the engine. She didn't cry. She just felt tired. And she knew now, Veronica was playing a bigger game than she thought. And Emily had no choice but to start playing too. It didn't take long after Emily saw Tyler for the trap to spring. 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days of walking around with that heavy feeling in her chest, knowing something had shifted, knowing she wasn't just being watched anymore. She was being followed. She didn't tell Daniel about Tyler. Not yet. She didn't know how. She didn't want him to look at her like she was a problem to fix. She wanted to hold on to the peace they'd finally found, for just a little longer. But deep down, she knew it was coming. It started on a Tuesday morning. The sun was out. Buddy was barking at squirrels in the backyard and the boys were fighting over cereal. Just a regular day. Emily was wiping down the counter when Daniel walked in holding his phone, his face stiff. He didn't say good morning, didn't kiss her cheek like he usually did. He just held out the phone. "You need to see this." Emily took the phone, confused, and then her whole stomach dropped. It was a news article, local blog, nothing huge. Just one of those gossip sites that posted about real estate, breakups, weddings, scandals. The kind of site people read, but never admit to reading. But there it was. Widowed millionaire's new romance raises eyebrows. Inside the housekeeper's hidden past. Emily stared at the screen, frozen. She didn't have to read the whole thing. She already knew. Her name was in the first paragraph. It brought up everything. Her arrest from years ago. The night she got into a fight at a gas station with her sister's abusive boyfriend. It said she assaulted him. It used words like violent history and troubled background and questionable influence around children. It had her mugshot. Old, blurry, but her. Daniel was watching her, not saying a word. Her hands were shaking. She handed the phone back. "Where did they get this?" she whispered, even though she already knew. Daniel's jaw was clenched. "Veronica sent it to me this morning. Said I should reevaluate who's living under my roof." Emily felt like her legs could give out. She leaned against the counter, trying to keep her voice steady. "It wasn't what they're making it sound like." "I know," Daniel said fast. "I know that. But Emily, it's out there now." The article didn't just go after her. It hinted that Daniel was reckless too, that he was putting his late wife's children at risk, that he was letting someone with a record raise them. She felt sick. "I should go," she said, barely above a whisper. "No," he snapped, stepping forward. "No, you're not going anywhere." Emily shook her head. "This isn't about what's true. It's about what people think is true. That's what she wants. She wants to make me look like a threat. You're not. But she made me one, Daniel. On paper, I look like a woman with a record who's living in your house and getting too close to your kids. She's painting a picture, and people are gonna believe it." Daniel ran both hands through his hair, breathing hard. "This is on me. I should have shut her down from the beginning. I should have seen this coming." Emily leaned against the fridge, her head spinning. How did she even get that file? She must have hired someone. Dug into everything. She's been digging from the start. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was the photo. The one from years ago where she was younger, scared, and handcuffed in the back of a police car. The worst moment of her life. Frozen forever, now splashed across the internet like it was a piece of gossip. The next day at the grocery store, she felt eyes on her. 2 women by the fruit section were whispering, not even trying to hide it. One of them looked straight at her, then quickly turned away. She wanted to disappear. She finished shopping fast, head down, heart racing. When she got back to the house, the boys ran to her like nothing was wrong. They were excited about a school project, something about volcanoes. Their world hadn't changed, not yet. But Emily knew it was only a matter of time. Daniel tried to do damage control. He called the blog, threatened legal action. They didn't care. They said everything they posted was public record. No lies, just facts. Twisted, cold, and out of context. But technically, facts. That night, Veronica showed up, uninvited. Again. She stood in the living room like she belonged there, arms crossed, voice calm as ever. "I warned you," she said to Daniel. "I gave you every chance to protect those boys." Daniel didn't even yell. His voice was cold. "You're not protecting anyone." She looked at Emily with a smile that wasn't a smile. "This isn't personal. It's about what's best for the family." Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. Veronica walked to the door, stopped and turned back. "I'm not going to let Grace's memory be dragged through the mud," she said. "And I'm not going to let some woman with a criminal record pretend she belongs in this family." Then she left. Daniel followed her out, slamming the door behind her. Emily stood in the middle of the room, silent. The walls felt too tight. The ceiling felt too low. She went upstairs, straight to the boys' room. They were asleep. Nathan had kicked his blanket off. Noah was snoring lightly. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched them, and that's when she knew. Veronica wasn't going to stop. Not until she was gone. And the worst part? Now she had a weapon. One that didn't care about truth, only about damage. The thing about love is that sometimes it doesn't care what's going on around it. It just keeps growing quietly, even when everything outside feels like it's falling apart. The article was still floating around. A few people at the school gave Daniel awkward looks during drop-off. A mom at the park whispered something to another mom, while Emily helped Nathan with his shoes. People stared longer than usual at the grocery store. At first it was hard. Emily wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear, but she didn't. She kept showing up. She kept cooking dinner, folding laundry, helping with homework, making the boys laugh. She kept loving that house like it was her own. And the boys, they didn't treat her any different. If anything, they clung to her more, like they could feel something wasn't right and wanted to remind her she still belonged there. Daniel didn't pull away either. If anything, he pulled in closer. Late one night, after the boys had gone to bed and the dishes were drying on the counter, Daniel walked into the kitchen without saying anything. He leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, just looking at her while she packed leftovers into containers. She turned around and saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't nervous. It was calm, honest. "I don't care what anyone says," he told her. Emily blinked, confused. "About what?" "About you. The story. The photo. The past. All of it." She paused, holding a spoon in her hand, still half full. "I know who you are now," he said, "and that's all that matters." She stared at him for a long second, then put the spoon down, closed the container, and wiped her hands slowly. She didn't say anything right away, not because she didn't believe him, but because his words felt like air she hadn't let herself breathe in days. I didn't want to bring this into your life," she said quietly. He walked toward her. "But you brought everything else." She tilted her head. "You brought the laughter back, the noise, the warmth. You made the boys believe in something again. You made me believe again." Emily looked down and he gently reached out and tilted her chin up with his hand. "I'm not letting you go," he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes were already saying everything. His hand stayed on her cheek for a long moment, and then, without rushing, without overthinking, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And when it happened, she didn't feel afraid anymore. That night, she didn't go home. They didn't sleep together. They just stayed on the couch, curled up under a blanket, watching some old movie with the volume too low. She fell asleep on his shoulder. He didn't move once. The next morning, she woke up to the smell of pancakes. Daniel was in the kitchen in his t-shirt and plaid pajama pants, flipping batter onto a pan and looking proud of himself like he'd just discovered a hidden talent. The boys were sitting at the table, sleepy-eyed, giggling at his mess. "Dad's cooking," Noah whispered like it was a secret. Emily leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, just watching. When Daniel looked up and saw her, he smiled. A soft, sleepy smile. One that didn't ask for anything. One that just said, "I'm glad you're here." And she was. The next few days were filled with little moments like that. Daniel brushing her hand as he passed her in the hallway. Nathan asking if she could read him a bedtime story instead of Daniel. Noah leaving a folded paper heart on her pillow with, "I love you, Emily," written in crooked letters. They didn't talk about the article. They didn't talk about Veronica. They didn't talk about the past, but the present, it felt strong. One rainy afternoon, the power went out. The house went dark and quiet for a second, and Emily froze, her chest tightening without warning. It was the kind of quiet that reminded her of a night years ago. A storm, a scream, a slammed door, something breaking. She hadn't thought about it in a long time, but it rushed back. Daniel noticed. He stepped closer. "You okay?" She nodded, but her hands were trembling. He didn't say anything else. He just wrapped his arms around her and held her there, right in the middle of the dark hallway, like that was enough to keep her from falling apart. And it was. Later that night, they lit candles and made popcorn on the stove. The boys thought it was the coolest thing ever. They all sat on the floor in the living room with flashlights and told scary stories. Well, Daniel tried to tell a scary story, but kept laughing halfway through. Emily's stories weren't scary at all, more like silly adventures. The boys didn't care. They just wanted her voice. That was the night Emily realized she had a place in the house. Not just in the corners or in the kitchen or as the one who cleaned up after everyone else, but in their lives, in their hearts. She had a place with Daniel. That same night, when the boys had finally passed out in their blanket fort, Daniel reached for her hand again. "I want this," he said softly. "With you." Emily squeezed his hand back. "I want it too," she whispered. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clear. And sometimes, that's all love is. Clear, simple, steady. Even in the middle of the storm. It was a Saturday afternoon and the house was filled with voices. Daniel had invited a few close friends over. Not for anything fancy, just a casual lunch in the backyard. Some of them were old business partners, a couple of neighbors, and one or two parents from the boys' school. It wasn't a big crowd, but it was enough to make the house feel full again. Emily wasn't used to being around that many people at once, not since she started working for the Millers. She kept herself busy bringing out drinks, checking on the boys, making sure Buddy didn't knock over the fruit tray with his giant tail. She smiled when someone said hi, nodded politely when asked how long she'd been with the family, answered questions just enough to be polite, never too much. She felt Daniel's eyes on her more than once, not in a bad way, in that quiet way of his, like he was watching her fit into his life in real time, and maybe a part of him still couldn't believe it was real. The day was going fine. The boys were running around barefoot on the grass, playing tag with the neighbors' kids. Laughter floated in and out of the house. Someone turned on music in the background. The smell of grilled chicken filled the air, and then Veronica walked in. No one invited her. Daniel looked up when he saw her walk through the side gate like she owned the place. His smile dropped instantly. She was dressed like she was going to a brunch in Beverly Hills, not a backyard lunch. Hair pulled back tight, sunglasses on her head, purse tucked neatly under one arm. She greeted people like they were old friends, hugging someone she hadn't seen in years, kissing the cheek of a man who once sat next to her at a charity dinner. Emily spotted her and instantly felt that cold pressure in her chest again. Veronica hadn't shown her face in almost 2 weeks since the article came out. Everyone knew it was her behind it. Even if she never said the words, it was written all over her actions. And now, here she was, floating through the party like she hadn't thrown a grenade into their lives. Daniel walked over to her, quiet, tense. "Why are you here?" he asked. Veronica smiled. "It's a family event, isn't it?" "I'm still family." Daniel didn't reply. He didn't want to cause a scene. Not in front of the boys. Not in front of the people who already probably read the story online. Emily kept her distance. She knew better than to walk into whatever was about to happen. She stayed by the kitchen island, refilling a tray of lemonade, pretending not to watch every second. But Veronica wasn't there to blend in. She waited until everyone had gathered in the backyard, waited until Daniel was standing near the grill, laughing at something with one of his friends, waited until Emily had just walked out with a tray of snacks, placing them gently on the table beside the drinks. Then she struck. She cleared her throat loud enough to pull attention, not yelling, just enough to quiet the music and turn a few heads. "I just want to say how nice it is to see everyone again," she said, raising her glass. "This family means everything to me, and I'm so happy to see it. Healing." People clapped politely, confused but smiling. Daniel stiffened, eyes locked on her. Veronica kept going. "I know there's been talk," she said, still smiling, "about the new woman in the house. The one who's taken on such an important role. With the kids. With Daniel." Emily's face went pale. Veronica's eyes flicked to her for just a second. "Just enough. I think it's wonderful when people get a second chance at life. Really, I do. But I also think it's important to know who we're bringing into our homes, into our children's lives." Daniel took a step forward. "Veronica." She raised her hand, like she was just trying to finish a toast. "I was shocked," she said, shaking her head slowly, "when I saw that mugshot. I mean, we all make mistakes, but some are harder to look past than others, especially when children are involved." The air dropped. All the noise disappeared. People froze mid-sip, mid-bite, mid-conversation. Emily's mouth went dry. Her fingers tightened around the tray in her hands. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. "Stop." Veronica turned to him, still smiling. "People deserve to know, Daniel. No, what they deserve is the truth," he snapped. "You're not doing this for them. You're doing this because you can't stand the fact that someone else has brought more love into this house than you ever have." Gasps, shuffling. people shifting uncomfortably. Veronica looked around, pretending to be offended. I just want what's best for the boys. Daniel didn't let her finish. You had 2 years to be part of their lives. And you showed up twice, both times to stir the pot. You're not here for them. You're here to poison the water. Emily finally found her voice. It's true, she said softly. Everyone turned toward her. She stepped forward, her hands shaking. It's true. I was arrested. I was 23. I was protecting my younger sister from a man who hit her. I pushed him. He hit the pavement. He pressed charges. I spent a night in jail, and the charges were dropped after a month. She looked around at all the eyes on her. No tears, just steady. I've made mistakes, but I've never hurt a child. I've never been dangerous, and I've never lied about who I am. Veronica opened her mouth, but Daniel spoke before she could. We love her, he said, just like that. Soft, clear, no need to shout. She's part of our family, and if anyone has a problem with that, you don't need to stay. Silence. Then, slowly, one person clapped, then another, then a few more. Emily stood still, stunned, like her whole body didn't know how to process what had just happened. Veronica scoffed, turned around without a word, and walked straight out the side gate without looking back. Daniel walked over to Emily, gently took the tray from her hands and set it down. Then he placed both hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eyes. You didn't deserve any of that. She nodded, but her lips trembled. I'm proud of you, he whispered. So damn proud. She leaned into him, and for the first time in days she felt safe again. The storm wasn't over, but now it wasn't just hers to face. The party was over. People had gone home. The food was half-eaten. The decorations were hanging by their last piece of tape, and the music had stopped playing hours ago. But the silence that filled the house now didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. Emily stood in the kitchen alone, rinsing plates she hadn't even touched during the party. She kept rewashing the same one over and over, even though it was already clean. Her hands moved on their own, but her mind was somewhere else. Still standing out in that yard, still feeling the stares, still hearing Veronica's voice in her ears. Daniel came in quietly behind her. You don't have to do that tonight, he said. She didn't turn around. I just need to stay busy. He walked closer, reached over, and shut off the faucet. The running water stopped, but the noise in her head didn't. I meant what I said, he told her. I know. He waited for her to look at him, but she didn't. She humiliated me, Daniel. I know. I didn't even know what to say. I felt like a criminal standing there in front of all those people. You weren't. You were brave. Emily shook her head. They looked at me like I didn't belong. Some of them did, he admitted. But the ones that matter, they stayed. That's not the point, she said, finally turning to face him. It's not just about that day. It's about what's coming next. She's not going to stop, and I can't keep letting your family be dragged into this. Daniel stepped closer, placing his hands on her arms. She's not my family. Not anymore. Yes, she is, Emily said, pulling away gently. She's Grace's sister. She has history here, and she's not going to walk away just because we want her to. Daniel didn't argue. He just stood there, breathing like he was trying to stay calm. I'm tired, Emily whispered. I'm tired of fighting for a place I already earned. You don't have to fight anymore. Yes, I do. Her voice cracked. Every single day I have to prove I'm not who she says I am. That I'm not some liar who came in here with a plan. That I'm not a mistake you're making just because you're grieving. You're not a mistake. She wiped her face quickly. I know that. But they don't. And she won't let anyone forget it. Daniel stepped toward her again. Then let her try, we'll get through it. Emily looked up at him with teary eyes. What if I don't want to keep going through it? What if this is too much for me? The silence that followed hit hard. Daniel didn't know what to say. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand reached for hers, then dropped. I love you, he said. I know, she whispered back. I love you too. More silence. She turned away again, wiping the same plate that didn't need wiping. I wrote the boys a letter, she said after a long pause. Daniel blinked. What? I wrote them a letter in case I left. He stepped forward, stunned. You're not leaving. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw it. She had already made up her mind. Emily, he said, almost breathless. Don't do this. I can't be the reason your life gets harder. You're the reason it got better. She shook her head. You don't see it. You're standing in the middle of it, and you don't see what this is doing to your name, to your reputation, to your boys. They love you. I know, she said softly, her voice breaking, and that's the part that's killing me. He stepped closer, grabbed both her hands, held them tight. I don't care about Veronica. I don't care about the press. I care about you. Us. This family. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, it almost looked like she'd change her mind. But then she whispered, "They'll be okay." Daniel felt something crack inside him. "I won't." She looked down. "I need to take a breath," she said. "Away from all this. Emily, I'm not running. I need time. To think. To be sure I'm not dragging you down." He tried to speak, tried to hold her tighter, but she pulled back gently. "I'm sorry." The next morning she was gone. No goodbye to the boys. Just the letter she left on their nightstand, tucked under Noah's favorite stuffed bear. Buddy laid beside the door for hours like he was waiting for her to come back. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, holding the blanket that still smelled like her. He didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, like someone who had just realized what it means to lose something that made him whole again. The morning after Emily left felt like a bad dream. At first Daniel thought she was just late coming downstairs, maybe still asleep after a hard night. But when he passed the guest room, the door was open, and the bed was made, too neatly. The closet was empty. Her bag was gone. On the boys' nightstand, there was an envelope with their names written on the front. Noah and Nathan. Inside, 2 small letters written in different colored pens, like she'd stayed up half the night trying to get the words right. Daniel read them quickly, his eyes blurring halfway through. "Be good for your dad, keep laughing. Don't forget you're the bravest boys I know. I love you. Emily." No explanation for him. Nothing for him at all. When the boys woke up, Nathan noticed first. He ran through the halls calling her name, thinking she was playing a game. Noah checked the kitchen, the porch, even outside by Buddy's food bowl. When they couldn't find her, their faces changed. They didn't cry right away. They just went quiet. That scary kind of quiet again. Daniel didn't know what to say. He just pulled them close, one under each arm, and told them she'd be back. He didn't even know if that was true. All day, the house felt wrong. It smelled like her soap and her cooking, but it was empty. The flowers on the table had started to wilt. Buddy lay by the door again, just like he used to, staring at nothing. By evening, Daniel couldn't sit still anymore. He opened his laptop and searched her name. Nothing. No social media updates, no new address. The same old mugshot popped up in the search results and made his chest tighten. He called her phone, straight to voicemail. He sent a text. "Where are you? Please call me." No reply. He called Mrs. Green. She hadn't heard from her. He called the temp agency where he'd first found her file. They said she hadn't contacted them. By midnight, Daniel was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. His phone sat on the counter, silent. Every time it buzzed with a random email, his heart jumped, then crashed. The boys couldn't sleep. Nathan kept asking if Emily was mad at them. Noah wouldn't talk at all. Daniel sat on the edge of Nathan's bed, rubbing his son's back until he drifted off and realized he was making the same small circles on his son's back that Emily used to. He whispered into the dark, "I'm going to find her. I promise." The next morning, he started looking. He drove to the diner on Oak Street, the one Emily sometimes mentioned getting coffee from on her days off. Nothing. No one had seen her. He asked at the bus station downtown, showed her picture to a clerk at the ticket counter. No sign of her. He went back to the neighborhood where she grew up, an area of small houses with chain-link fences and cracked sidewalks. He parked and walked around even though he knew it looked strange. He stopped at a corner store and asked about her sister. The clerk shrugged. Daniel found himself sitting in his car in front of an old apartment building she'd once pointed to while telling a story about working 3 jobs. The windows were covered in old curtains. Kids played on the sidewalk. He sat there for almost an hour before finally driving off feeling like a fool. By the 3rd day, he was running on coffee and little sleep. He left the boys with Mrs. Green and drove out to the next town over where he'd heard Emily had lived for a year. He asked around at a laundromat, a church, a small bakery. Most people didn't know her. A few said she looked familiar. At one point, he sat in his car outside a gas station and saw a girl with brown hair and a denim jacket walk by. His heart jumped, but when she turned around, it wasn't Emily. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel and exhaled. He kept replaying their last night together in his head. The way she'd stood in the kitchen holding that plate like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The way she said, "They'll be okay," like she was already gone. And then the anger came. Not at her, At himself. He should have told her sooner that none of this mattered to him, that he didn't care about the article or Veronica or anything else, that she was part of them now, no matter what. He slammed his fist lightly against the steering wheel and whispered, "You're not just someone who worked here." It had been years since Daniel had felt helpless. He was a man who fixed things, closed deals, made decisions, but this wasn't something he could fix with a phone call or a check. The next night after the boys were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and searched, "Missing persons private investigator near me." He clicked the first link. The man on the phone asked for details. Daniel gave him everything he could. The man asked if Emily had run before, if she had enemies. Daniel said no. Then he hesitated and mentioned Tyler. When he hung up, he leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The kitchen smelled like the last meal Emily had cooked. He whispered into the empty room, "Come back." Outside, it started to rain. The sound of it against the windows was the only thing keeping the house from feeling completely dead. In the boys' room upstairs, Noah had written, "We miss you, Emily," on a piece of paper and taped it to the wall. Nathan had drawn a stick figure of her holding both their hands. Daniel stood in the doorway and watched them sleep, and for the first time since Grace's funeral, he let himself cry. Not because of the article, not because of Veronica, because he had found something that felt like home again, and now it was gone, and he didn't know how to live without it. It happened on a Thursday. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. The air thick like the sky hadn't decided yet if it was done crying. Daniel had been up since 5, refreshing his email every few minutes, hoping the private investigator had something, even a hint, a direction, anything. And then finally, at 8:43 a.m., the message came through. Subject, "Lead on, Emily Carter. She's working at a diner just off Highway 12 in Maple Creek. Small place, nothing fancy. Been there about a week. Using her real name. Quiet. Keeps her head down. Let me know if you want to go alone or need backup." Daniel didn't even finish his coffee. He printed the address, threw on a jacket, and left Buddy with Mrs. Green. The boys were already at school. He didn't tell them anything. Not yet. He wasn't sure what he'd be coming back with. Maple Creek was small, a place with more stop signs than traffic lights. The diner was at the edge of town, the kind with cracked booths, a buzzing neon sign in the window, and an old radio playing soft rock that made the whole place feel like it hadn't moved on from the 90s. Daniel parked across the street and just sat there for a second watching. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone pale. Then he saw her, through the window. Emily, wearing a plain blue apron, her hair pulled back, no makeup, carrying a pot of coffee from table to table, smiling politely, tired, but alive. He got out of the car slowly, walked across the street like the ground might give out underneath him. The little bell above the diner door rang when he stepped inside. It was quiet. A few old men sipping coffee in the back corner, a couple in a booth near the window. Nobody looked up. Nobody except her. She turned when she heard the bell. Her eyes met his, and everything stopped. She froze. The coffee pot in her hand stayed still, like she'd forgotten how to move, like she wasn't sure if she was awake or dreaming. Daniel didn't say a word. He just looked at her. She blinked fast and turned away, walking toward the counter in the back, like she needed a second to breathe. He followed. "Emily," he said softly. She set the pot down and grabbed a towel, wiping a spot on the counter that didn't need wiping. "I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think you'd leave." Her hand stopped moving. She stared at the counter for a long time before finally looking up at him again. "I didn't want to make things worse." "You didn't. You made everything worse by disappearing." Her lip trembled, but she pressed it tight. "You don't know what it's like. To have your worst moment thrown out in front of people like you're nothing. To see people look at you like you're dangerous. Like you don't belong near the kids you love." He stepped closer. "I do know what that feels like. You think I haven't been judged? That people didn't look at me after Grace died and say, 'There's the man who couldn't keep his family together'? You think I haven't carried guilt every day since?" She blinked hard, her eyes wet now. Daniel lowered his voice. "You left, Emily. You didn't just walk away from me. You walked away from Noah and Nathan. You told them they were safe with you, and then you disappeared without saying goodbye." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. "I wrote them a letter. That's not the same." "I didn't know what else to do," she said, finally turning toward him. "You and the boys. You became everything to me, and I didn't want to be the reason someone took that away. I thought if I left, maybe things would calm down. Maybe the stories would stop. Maybe you'd be okay. Daniel shook his head. We weren't okay. I wasn't okay. And the boys? They've been asking for you every single day. Nathan barely eats. Noah talks in his sleep and calls out your name. Emily turned away, her shoulders shaking. He stepped around the counter and gently touched her arm. Why didn't you tell me you were scared? She swallowed hard. Because I didn't want to hear you say I was right. I would have told you were wrong, he said. I would have told you that none of it matters. Not the past, not the noise, not Veronica. Just you, just us. She looked up at him then, really looked, her eyes red, her hands shaking. I was terrified, she whispered. I've never had anything this good before, and when you've been through what I've been through, you don't trust good things to last. Daniel nodded, his voice cracking. I know. I was scared too. Still am. But I'd rather be scared with you than be safe without you. She closed her eyes, and more tears came. I missed you. He pulled her into a hug. Not a soft one, not a careful one. A full one. The kind where you hold someone like you're trying to put all the broken pieces back together with your arms. She held onto him just as tightly, burying her face in his chest. I didn't stop loving you, she whispered. I didn't stop looking. They stood there like that for a long time, right in the middle of that empty diner, surrounded by the smell of burnt toast and coffee and cracked linoleum floors that creaked when you stepped on them. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was that he'd found her, and she let him. It was raining when they drove back. Not heavy, just that kind of steady rain that makes the roads shine under the headlights. Daniel didn't push her to talk during the drive. He just kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting near the gear shift, close enough for her to see but not touching unless she reached first. Emily sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap, staring out the window. Her bag was at her feet. The car was warm, but her palms were cold. She wasn't sure what she was walking back into. The boys, the house, the noise, the questions. She wasn't scared of them. She was scared of what it would feel like to see their faces after she had left. She didn't know if they'd be angry, if they'd cry, if they'd pull away. She told herself they were kids, and kids forgive, but deep down, she didn't believe that yet. Daniel glanced at her a few times but didn't say anything. At one point, at a red light, he reached over and covered her hand with his. She didn't pull away. She just let it stay there. When they turned onto the street, Buddy was already at the window. He always knew when Daniel's car was coming before it even reached the driveway. This time was no different. His tail started hitting the door like a drum before the engine even cut off. Inside, the boys were sitting on the living room rug, building a tower out of blocks. They weren't talking, just sitting close to each other, concentrating. Mrs. Green was on the couch knitting. She looked up when she heard the car and saw Daniel's silhouette through the window. When she saw Emily behind him, she froze mid-stitch. Daniel opened the door first. Buddy bolted forward, tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. Emily crouched instinctively and the dog pressed his face into her chest, whining like he'd been waiting for her forever. She buried her face in his fur, already crying quietly. Then the boys turned. Nathan stood first, his mouth open but no sound coming out. Noah dropped a block and blinked at her like he didn't trust what he was seeing. Emily stayed on her knees, afraid to move too fast. Hi, she whispered. Noah was the first to break. He ran at her full speed and wrapped his arms around her neck, so hard it knocked her back onto her heels. Nathan followed, slower at first, but then he was there too, climbing into her lap, pressing his face against her shoulder like he didn't care if she left wet spots from his tears on her shirt. I'm sorry, she whispered over and over, holding both of them. I'm so sorry, I'm here now. They didn't say anything for a long time. They just held her. Her knees hurt from the hardwood floor, but she didn't move. She wasn't going to be the first to let go. Daniel stood a few feet away, watching. His eyes were wet, but he didn't hide it. Mrs. Green had put down her knitting and was wiping her eyes behind her glasses. Even Buddy sat quietly beside them now, his head pressed to Emily's leg like he understood. When the boys finally pulled back, they didn't ask questions. They just touched her face like they were checking she was real. Noah's hand stayed on her cheek. Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. Are you staying? Nathan asked softly. Emily's throat tightened. If you want me to. Both boys nodded fast. Daniel cleared his throat and stepped forward. She's staying. Emily looked up at him, unsure if he was saying it to reassure the boys or to reassure her. He gave a small nod, like he meant it both ways. The rest of the afternoon was quiet. The boys didn't want to leave her side, so they pulled her into the playroom and showed her the little things they'd done since she'd been gone. A new drawing on the fridge, a project for school. They climbed into her lap every few minutes like they were afraid she'd vanish if they blinked. Emily let them. She didn't stop touching them either. A hand on Noah's hair, an arm around Nathan's shoulders. Small squeezes just to feel them solid under her hands again. Later, when the boys finally went upstairs for their bath, Daniel found her standing in the hallway by their door. Her hands were trembling a little. She looked up at him like she didn't know what to do with everything she was feeling. "They didn't hate me," she whispered. "They couldn't," he said. "I thought maybe they would." Daniel stepped closer. "They just missed you." She exhaled shakily. "I missed them so much. You can stop running now," he said quietly. "You're home." The word hit her harder than she expected. She pressed her hand to her mouth and nodded. Downstairs, the kitchen still smelled like coffee from the morning. There was a note on the counter from Mrs. Green saying she'd pick the boys up from school tomorrow so Emily could get some rest. Emily smiled at that. Daniel poured 2 mugs of tea and handed one to her. She sat at the table, holding it with both hands like it might anchor her. "I didn't think you'd come for me," she admitted. "I didn't think you'd let me find you," he said. "I almost didn't. I'm glad you did." They sat there for a while without talking. The sound of the rain outside filled the room. It was the first time in weeks the house didn't feel like it was waiting for something bad to happen. The boys' voices drifted down the stairs, their usual chatter before bedtime. Emily listened to it like it was music. She didn't know what was coming next. Veronica wasn't gone. The past wasn't erased. None of this was easy, but for the first time since she'd left, she felt like maybe she could breathe again. And the house, for the first time in a long time, felt whole. Weeks passed, and for the first time since Grace's death, the Miller house didn't feel like a stopover. It felt like a home. The boys laughed easily now. They didn't just cling to Emily. They built their days around her. Nathan started drawing family pictures again, but this time there were 4 people, not 3. Noah began calling her M, in that casual way kids give nicknames to people who feel safe. Even Buddy seemed lighter, bounding through the halls instead of lying by the door. Daniel changed too. He started leaving his office door open when he worked. He made breakfast sometimes, even if it was just toast. He smiled without thinking about it. At night, when the boys were asleep, he and Emily would sit on the porch with mugs of tea, their knees touching, talking about nothing and everything. It felt like the quiet they'd both been looking for their whole lives. It didn't take long before Daniel knew what he wanted to do. One evening after the boys had gone to bed, he asked Emily to sit with him at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd once told her he was falling for her. This time he didn't have a mug of coffee. He had a small box in his hand. She saw it instantly and her heart jumped. "I didn't plan a speech," he said, smiling nervously. "I didn't want this to feel like a business meeting. I just want to say what I feel." Emily sat very still, her palms against the table. "You changed everything," Daniel said quietly. "For me, for the boys, for this house. I didn't think we'd ever be okay again. And then you walked in and we were." Her eyes filled with tears before he even opened the box. "I don't care about the noise," he said. "I don't care about the past. I just care about this. You, me, them, us." He opened the box. A simple ring, not flashy, not like the headlines that used to follow him. Just something small, warm and real. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice almost breaking. "Will you marry me?" She didn't speak for a second. Her hand covered her mouth, her tears spilling. Then she nodded, hard. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time since Grace's accident, he felt a weight lift off his chest. She leaned across the table and kissed him, her hand on the back of his neck, the ring catching the kitchen light as they held each other. The next morning the boys found out. Daniel and Emily told them together in the living room. Nathan's jaw dropped. Noah actually jumped off the couch. "You're gonna be our mom?" he asked, eyes wide. Emily's voice cracked when she said, "If that's okay with you." Both boys tackled her in a hug so hard she almost fell backward. Everything after that became a blur of planning. Not a big fancy wedding. Emily didn't want that, and Daniel was tired of appearances. Something small in the backyard with the boys as part of it. Mrs. Green helped with lists. The boys made drawings of how they thought the ceremony should look. Even Buddy got a little bow tie. For a few weeks it was just joy. Simple joy. Dress fittings. Picking a cake. The boys practicing their lines for the little ceremony. Daniel and Emily moving through the house like a couple who had been married for years already. Then came the final blow. It happened 3 nights before the wedding. Daniel was putting the boys to bed when his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, but something about the unknown number made him pick up. "Mr. Miller?" the voice said. "Yes? This is Detective Rhodes from Maple Creek. We're investigating an incident involving a man named Tyler Price. He listed you and a Ms. Emily Carter as contacts." Daniel's heart started pounding. "What happened?" "There was an altercation outside a bar. He's in the hospital. He claims he was assaulted. He's accusing Ms. Carter of threatening him earlier this month." Daniel's mind went blank. "That's impossible. She's been here. She hasn't." "I'm just letting you know," the detective said. "We'll need to speak with her." Daniel hung up slowly, his hand trembling. He went downstairs. Emily was sitting at the table writing out little place cards for the wedding. She looked up when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. He sat down across from her. "That was the police." Her pen slipped from her hand. "They're investigating Tyler," he said. "He's in the hospital. He told them you threatened him." Emily stared at him, her mouth open but no sound coming out. "I didn't," she whispered. "I know," he said quickly. "I know you didn't, but they're coming to talk to you." She pressed her hands to her forehead. "He's lying. He's trying to drag me down, or someone's making him do it." "Veronica," Daniel said quietly. Emily looked at him. "She's behind this." He reached for her hand. "We're not calling off the wedding." Tears filled her eyes. "Daniel, we're not," he said again. "I don't care what they throw at us. We're not." Her hand shook in his. "They're trying to ruin me." "They won't," he said. "I won't let them." But as he sat there holding her hand, feeling her tremble, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another shot from Veronica. This felt like the move she'd been saving, the one meant to destroy everything. And now it was here. The morning of the wedding felt calm. The sun broke through clouds, soft light warming the lawn. The boys ran around stacking clean chairs. Mrs. Green placed bouquets. Daniel looked at Emily, his face shy and serious and full of love. Emily wore a simple white dress. Nothing flashy, just something that made her look like she finally belonged. The boys had little boutonnieres and a small corsage for Emily's wrist. Guests began to arrive. Close friends, neighbors, a few faces from Daniel's business world. A few local news guys from that gossip site came, but they stayed back. They weren't going to ruin this day. Not today. Veronica was not there. Everyone believed she'd gotten the message. Today is not her show. As they all gathered on the grass, Daniel stood at the flowered arch. Emily walked down the little aisle between white chairs. The boys held her dress just behind her, taking care, careful because she was their world. Daniel's eyes were full of tears as she approached him. He held out his hand and she took it. There was laughter and soft music. And then Daniel started to speak, but he stopped. Someone appeared from behind the crowd, a woman entirely unfamiliar to most. She walked slowly down the aisle. She was in her mid-20s, dressed in light colors, eyes bright, but holding fear and hope at the same time. Emily gasped. The crowd murmured. Daniel frowned. The woman's pace slowed as she neared them. She stopped a few feet away and looked right at Emily. She took a breath. "My name is Lily." The voice was steady but soft. She looked at Emily. "I'm Sarah's daughter." The gasp from the crowd was loud. Silence crashed over everything. Emily felt her heart pound. Her knees felt weak. "Sarah?" Daniel said, stepping forward. "Grace's name was Grace Miller." "Sarah?" Lily nodded. She was adopted by Grace's parents when she was a baby. The same parents who adopted Grace after their first child died. I only found out a few days ago, when I got a birth record. I found Emily in the documents. I asked about her. I asked about her sister, and I found out I'm that sister. Emily looked at Lily, tears filling her eyes. The air felt sharp. Everyone waited. No one spoke. Lily held the papers in her hand. Legal documents, adoption records, birth certificates. She stepped closer. "You and I, we were sisters from the start," she said. "I don't know why Grace never told you. Maybe she didn't even know. But the records match. DNA tests confirm it." Emily's breath came fast. She looked at Daniel, her eyes wide. He stood frozen. Lily lifted her hands. "I didn't come to take anyone's place. I came because I lost my mother too. I wanted to find the truth. I wanted to find family. And when I found out where one of you was, I knew I had to see you." Noah stepped forward, confusion in his eyes. Nathan did too. The guests looked between Emily and Lily. Mrs. Green's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel's jaw hung open. Emily's voice shook. "You're my sister?" Lily nodded, tears falling. "Yes, you're my sister. We were separated but always tied. I watched from far away, and when I learned your name, when I saw where you were, I hoped one day I could meet you." Daniel reached for Emily's hand, turned to Lily, then back to Emily, then to Lily again. The world seemed to spin. Emily looked at Lily's face, trying to absorb every detail, the shape of her eyes, the tilt of her smile, the voice she just heard. It felt like seeing a mirror, but someone she didn't quite recognize yet. "Why now?" Emily whispered. Lily's eyes filled. "Because I couldn't wait longer. Because I needed to know the sister I always felt missing." A soft sob escaped Emily. She turned toward Daniel. "I didn't know." He swallowed hard. "None of us did." He looked at Lily. "Welcome." There was a stunned pause. Then the crowd started clapping softly. The tension cracked. Some wiped their eyes. The music started again. Emily let go of Daniel's hand and stepped toward Lily. The boys followed her. Nathan grabbed Emily's dress. Noah took Lily's hand. Emily hesitated, then wrapped both arms around Lily in a hug so fierce it looked like she feared she'd lose her again. Lily hugged back, hot tears on both their cheeks. The guests watched, some crying, some smiling. Daniel joined them, his arms around all three. They stood together, Emily, Lily, the boys, and Daniel, holding each other in that awkward, raw moment of new truth. And then Emily whispered to Lily, "You belong here." Lily cried into her shoulder. The boys looked up in wonder. Daniel brushed faces with gentle hands. In that moment, all the battles, the pain, the lies, they all felt small beside this. The twist that no one saw coming tied everything together, healed old wounds, opened doors. Veronica might have tried to wreck the story. Tyler might have thrown accusations. The past might have been full of shadows. But here, in the sunlight on the lawn, something real and big and true just happened. A family, one they never knew was waiting, found itself at the most unexpected time. And Emily, the housekeeper, the protector, the woman who saved a broken home, now had something more than love. She had a sister, and together, they were going to build what was missing.